welcome back to the 13 Ranks of Halloween. I'm Adam J. Now, you all voted, and you decided that you'd rather see me rank the Terminator series instead of the Underworld series by an overwhelming amount, by the way. 87% of you voted for Terminator, so we're gonna get to that today. With the newest film, Terminator Dark Fate, just being released, I felt that it was appropriate to revisit this series. Now, just so you all know, going into this, there will be massive spoilers for all the films, including Terminator Dark Fate. So if you still have any ambition to see Terminator Dark Fate and haven't gone to the theaters to see it, I would recommend just shutting off the video now. With that said, let's get started ranking every entry in the Terminator franchise. At number 7 for me, in dead last, is Terminator Genisys. Oh, where to even begin? This is a movie that, honest to God, feels like a glorified fanfiction as opposed to an actual continuation of a franchise. It's a film that completely negates the events of Terminator 3 and Terminator Salvation and acts like it's the third film in the franchise. But what it also does is tell us that the events of Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 did not matter because it negates them both literally in the first 25 minutes. Listen, I can understand wanting to wipe the slate clean as the reception to Terminator 3 and Terminator Salvation were lukewarm at best. Okay, but why are you trying to erase the two movies that everyone already loves? The film feels like some bizarre Elseworlds tale, where John Connor is turned evil by Skynet, Kyle is the one that needs saving instead of Sarah, Sarah is 19, even though her character was born in 1959, so she should be around 25 in 1984, but whatever, and Jay Courtney is allowed to play Kyle Reese like an annoying jackass who never shuts up. Listen, all of these ideas sound interesting on paper, but the movie does not go about them in a way that makes any sense. The movie is entirely miscasted. Jay Courtney was the worst choice they could have gone with for Kyle Reese. He looks nothing like Kyle Reese, he acts nothing like Kyle Reese, and he comes off as less of a warrior and more of a complete annoyance. Literally every other line out of his mouth is a stupid quip, and none of it works. The action is either stolen from previous films or completely generic. The new plot points make no sense. The film makes almost no attempt to explain its inconsistencies. The dialogue is pretty bad most of the time, and the film is miscast beyond repair. While it may have been well-intentioned, it is the worst sequel in this franchise for me by a clear mile.
I've been waiting for you.
At number 6 for me, sadly, you know what? I don't care if I'm going to get hate for this. Terminator Dark Fate. I'm sorry. The wound is still fresh on this one, guys. I'm surprised I didn't put this one dead last. Listen, I just did a whole review ranting about this, so you can watch that if you want. I'll leave the link in the description below, but for right now, I'll just give you the highlights. I maintain that this film does have some good acting. I maintain that it has some decently shot action, and that it's not badly directed. The problem with this movie is the utterly disrespectful script that craps all over the legacy of John Connor, a character who'd been built up since the first movie, by killing him in the first 2 minutes. And then it says, fuck it, we're not going to add anything new to the series. The plot of this movie is literally Terminator 2 again, with sprinkles of the first film, Genisys, Salvation, and Rise of the Machines just thrown in there for good measure. Literally, this movie is cherry-picking a bunch of crap from all these films that it's trying to just negate altogether. Why would you do that? This is like a Frankenstein mishmash all duct-taped together to make one big pile of crap, and I don't understand it. The script is such a huge missed opportunity, and it results in a film that, while liked by many critics, leaves the rest of us feeling cheated, like our investment in the first two films never really mattered. So yeah, the film has some redeeming qualities. Not everything in it is terrible, and if you like it, be my guest. But I'm sorry, I'm calling sellout when I see it. It sells out its characters, it sells out its fans, it sells out its integrity, and it completely obliterated any goodwill that I may have had left for this franchise. Please stop making Terminator movies. Stop. I would say just let the franchise die with dignity, but let's be honest, dignity was thrown out the window a long fucking time ago. Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines. Now, if you were to say to me that, well, Dark Fate's a better directed movie, I wouldn't argue that. You know what? It is. It's a better directed movie. I would even say that, you know what? Some of the acting in Dark Fate is better. Much like Dark Fate, when I first saw this film, I did not like it, and I ragged on it for years. However, upon rewatching it a few weeks ago, I was surprised at how much I actually enjoyed it. Despite all its faults. And believe me, there are faults.
That being said, whereas Dark Fate felt like they were wiping the slate clean with new characters at the expense of the previous storylines and characters, this film feels more like a natural progression of the events of T2. John Connor is living off the grid, awaiting a dark future that, for all he knows, may never come. His worst fears come to fruition, though, when a new Terminator, the TX, arrives from the future to kill him and his lieutenants. In true Terminator movie fashion, Arnold is sent back to protect him and his future wife, Catherine Brewster, played by Claire Danes, all leading to a surprisingly somber ending.
Now, let's get the obvious criticism of this film out of the way, because this is the one everyone uses to hate on this movie. Yes, the theme from Terminator 2, there is no fate but what we make for ourselves, is completely dicked over in this movie. That being said, is that really fair to hold against it?
No matter what you do, any sequel you make after T2 is going to completely dick over this moral. And they pretty much all have. Whether it be this film, Dark Fate, or Genisys, some sort of Judgment Day is always going to be inevitable, and that theme is going to be left irrelevant.
In all honesty, let's be honest, this shouldn't have gone past 2 movies to begin with. But it did, so if you want anything else Terminator-related, that's something that you have to get over.
Rise of the Machines suggests that you can try to change your fate. You can try to make your own destiny. But eventually that fate is going to self-correct and catch up with you. We see that as John reconnects with Catherine Brewster and everything that should have happened years ago begins to fall back into place. And ending the movie the way that Terminator 3 did was a ballsy move.
Now, you could argue that killing John Connor in the beginning of Dark Fate was also a ballsy move. I would completely disagree. There is a difference between having balls and kicking your audience in the balls. This is the former, Dark Fate is the latter.
The action is fun at times. I would go as far as to say the whole crane sequence is one of the best action set pieces of the last 2 decades. The TX used to bother me, but rewatching this film, I don't think I ever gave this Terminator enough credit. She can develop replacement weapons when she's damaged, she controls other machines, she effectively kicks Arnold's ass in several scenes, and even controls him at one point to go after John. She jumpstarts the new Judgment Day by activating the other machines for the Uprising. She's essentially an upgraded version of the T-1000. In addition, Kristanna Loken can be damn intimidating in some scenes. I mean, why did I ever hate this Terminator? She's fucking awesome. She's nowhere near on the level of Robert Patrick's T-1000 or Arnold's original Terminator, but for an evil Terminator, she effectively gets the job done.
I also like the plot point in the beginning that since John couldn't be located, the TX was actually sent back to murder John's lieutenants, which is a pretty good move on Skynet's part. I mean, yeah, it doesn't last too long in the film, but if John doesn't have the manpower to do the uprising, then yeah, there's not really going to be much of an uprising, is there? For once it shows Skynet thinking outside the box. I mean, wars are not fought by one person. But as I said, there's some big problems with this movie. It's not perfect. The comedy is so bad. Oh, God.
When Arnold's allowed to be the ass-kicking machine we all know and love, he's great. Hell, how he beats the TX is entirely badass. But all of that is undercut by moments of horrendous comedy. The toss of the hand scene and the stripper glasses make me cringe every time. They are that bad. Also, while I like the idea of John trying to escape his destiny, there are some scenes where they make him kind of stupid. That scene in the car when he asks him if he remembers anything from T2 is the ultimate facepalm moment. You watch the T-101 die! It's obviously a different model, you idiot! Nick Stahl is very hit and miss for me. There are scenes where he's legitimately fine in the role, and others where he just doesn't deliver. I don't hate his portrayal, but he's definitely one of the weaker John Connors we've had, and one of the whiniest, if I'm being honest. Claire Danes as Catherine Brewster is a fine casting choice, but she's not really allowed to do much until the end. I felt like this character was just kind of wasted, like there was so much more they could have done with her.
So yeah, this movie isn't perfect, and I just recently came around to it, but I felt like it did a better job of preserving and pushing the Terminator timeline forward than Dark Fate did. Does it live up to those first 2 films? God, no, but not many things do.
These 2 movies are pure perfection. Any film that follows them directly was always bound to be littered with issues. Terminator 3 is good popcorn entertainment, with a great ending.
It's not perfect, but entertaining enough if watched through the right perspective.
Messiah is irrelevant. I am a machine.
At number 4 for me is what I consider to be the most underrated entry in the Terminator franchise, Terminator Salvation. Now, for those who don't know, I have a long history with this movie. This was the very first movie I ever reviewed for this channel. The review looks awful. It sounds awful. Even I look awful. Oh my god. It's so bad. But I've never deleted it. It's still on the channel. I kept it up for sentimental reasons. And make no mistake, I love Terminator Salvation. Out of all the films released after Judgment Day, this was the absolute best, and I will die on that hill. I actually only started doing these reviews because I was such a huge fan of this film. I saw all the negativity towards it, and I wanted to defend it. And yes, I also rag on Terminator 3 a lot in that review, so yeah, I, again, didn't always like Terminator 3. But let's talk about Salvation. I'm actually going to go a little long with this one because I still feel the need to defend it after all these years. I think the biggest misconception about this film is that it's a prequel. It's not. It is clearly not. From the opening scene, the movie makes it abundantly clear that it takes place after Terminator 3 during the Splinter timeline.
The original Judgment Day took place in 1997. How can this be a prequel if Marcus Wright was executed in 2003? So yeah, let's just throw the crap argument of this being a prequel right out the window. 14 years after Terminator 3, we follow John Connor in the future war. Some believe him, while others in the Resistance see him as a false prophet. Enter Marcus Wright, a convict put to death years ago who mysteriously awakens with no explanation and befriends a young Kyle Reese. When Reese is captured by Skynet, Marcus must team up with John Connor to infiltrate a Skynet prison camp and save him.
This movie gave me what I wanted from the series. A movie about the future war. No time travel, no Terminator protectors, no constantly ensuring the survival of John Connor. Well, throughout the whole movie at least. Just something very new and unique that drove the Terminator story forward in an interesting way.
The movie gives us a great understanding of how this future is, how it differs from the original future war, and how John Connor is able to amass such a huge legion of followers within the Resistance, despite not being the leader of the Resistance. The casting is superb all around. Sam Worthington's performance as Marcus Wright is one of the best in the franchise. His whole arc is done beautifully. It raises questions on the difference between man and machine. Can we control destiny? Do we deserve a second chance? Can we forgive ourselves for our past and push forward with our future? These are all themes that feel relevant within the series. The back and forth between him and Kyle Reese is nicely handled. I love the throwback of Marcus teaching Kyle how to tie the shotgun to his arm. His relationship with Blair was a nice touch and wasn't overdone. It's a nice side story within the film that doesn't detract from anything. But it's his chemistry with Christian Bale's John Connor that ends up being the highlight. Every back and forth between them is perfect. Speaking of which, Christian Bale is without a doubt one of the best John Connors we've ever had. His version of the character is the one I always wanted to see, the one that has been built up from the start, the savior and warrior of the Resistance. It felt like a perfect progression of his character. He went from a scared kid to an apprehensive hero to a hardened warrior.
But the absolute best thing in this movie for me is Anton Yelchin as Kyle Reese. As I rewatched this film, all I could think was, why did we not appreciate this actor so much more when he was alive? And I'm sorry, but if there is a God, he could not have created a human being to look more like a young Michael Biehn. In every scene he's in, he made me believe that he was the teenage version of Kyle Reese.
He gets the voice down, the speech inflections, the movements, the attitude. Everything that made Kyle Reese such an endearing and memorable character is in this performance. It is every bit as good as Michael Biehn in the original.
And I'm sorry, but even the most die-hard haters of this film cannot deny that. I would honestly love to see them try.
His character is so beautifully handled. Seeing Kyle Reese and John Connor fight side by side after 4 movies, even if only for a few minutes, was a real treat to see as a Terminator fan. The action all around is absolutely superb. We get a ton of different Terminators, we finally get to see the T-600 models with the rubber skin that Kyle mentioned in the first film, and McG directs every action scene with an intensity that never lets up.
Now, there are 3 specific points that I'm going to talk about, because these are the 3 things that people often use to hate on this film. And I think all 3 arguments are complete bullshit. So, let's just talk about them.
1. Why does all the action take place during the day? Kyle clearly said in the first film that they only fight at night.
Okay, fair enough. Are we forgetting that this is in a completely different timeline? And that this machine uprising was brought about by a different version of Skynet?
Again, this is not a prequel. It is a different future war in a completely separate timeline. So humans fighting during the day instead of at night is entirely plausible within this splintered timeline. Second point. Skynet has Kyle Reese. If they kill him, the war is over. Without Kyle Reese, there's no John Connor. It's so stupid that they don't just kill him. They could end the war right there.
You know, it boggles the mind that I even have to point out the utter stupidity of those statements, but I'm gonna do it. No! Killing Kyle Reese does not get rid of this John Connor. By that logic, John Connor would have vanished after Judgment Day was stopped in T2.
This is alternate reality logic, not Back to the Future's erased from existence logic. The timeline was splintered into an alternate reality after T2, setting forth a new sequence of events. This is why Judgment Day happens in the 2000s instead of 1997.
This Kyle Reese does not, I repeat, does not have to be sent back in time as a dick in a box for John Connor's mom.
Killing him will not make John Connor non-existent, because it's the Kyle Reese from the splintered timeline and not the old timeline. John Connor's actual father is from a time that no longer happened. If stopping that plane of existence didn't make John vanish into nothing, killing this new Kyle Reese sure as shit isn't going to do that either.
Skynet knows this. This is why they use him as bait instead of just killing him. They know that killing this version of Kyle is not going to make this version of John disappear. Now you may be wondering if this is true. Then why does John Connor believe that Kyle still needs to be sent back? Because that's what his mother told him in the videotapes that he's been listening to throughout the entire movie.
It's literally the only information he has to go on, aside from his experiences after her death. Number 3. How could Skynet know about all the different times that the Terminators went after John Connor? This makes no sense. This is stupid.
Well, give it half a second's thoughts.
Who set the new Judgment Day into motion in the previous film? The TX, who coincidentally knew everything about John Connor and the previous attempts to kill him, and who more than likely uploaded all of that information to Skynet when she activated the machines.
I mean, if she's trying to ensure the survival of Skynet, it'd be pretty stupid not to give Skynet all of that information from the start. So again, let me reiterate, none of these things are plot holes or inconsistencies when you actually take the time to think about them. Overall, out of all the films released after T2, Salvation is the only one that ever measured up. Great action, great acting, great themes, and great execution all around. The hate this movie has gotten is entirely undeserved, and I will never understand it. I know I just pissed so many of you off, so let's keep this ball rolling. Number 3 for me is Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Oh, shut up! Make your own damn list if you don't like it. I'm not going to pretend this movie isn't amazing. It is.
It is one of the best sequels ever made, with groundbreaking effects, superb character development, and a story that brilliantly turned the plot of the original on its head.
I understand completely why people love this movie so much. And if it's your favorite, you know what? Good for you. It's never been mine.
Set over a decade after the first film, Sarah Connor is at a mental institution as no one believes her about the future war with the machines, and 12-year-old John Connor is living in foster care. When a new Terminator, the T-1000, comes from the future to kill John, a reprogrammed T-800, once again played by Arnold, is sent to protect him. The effects in this film still hold up. The liquid metal effects from the T-1000 are all awesome. The practical effects are all on point.
I mean, when you see something getting destroyed in this movie, it's actually being destroyed on screen.
Digital effects were only used when absolutely necessary. So this movie provides a beautiful mix of both practical and CGI work. This film beautifully played against expectation, making Arnold's T-800 the protector this time around, instead of the cold-hearted killing machine he was in the first. The trailers for the film didn't even advertise this, so people who saw it in theaters upon its release were genuinely surprised, and happy with the turnaround. Arnold Schwarzenegger, without a doubt, is one of the best performances of his career, as we see him learn and adapt and even become a father figure to John.
I mean, yeah, we all know that Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't the greatest actor on the planet, but This role is so well suited for him that when you think of Terminator, his face is the first thing you're going to think of in your head.
Sarah Connor is no longer the scared waitress she was in the first film. Linda Hamilton is absolutely badass in this film, and it's good to see her character progress even further. The scene with Miles Dyson and his family is every bit as heartbreaking as it is nail-biting. Seeing her go over the edge, becoming no different than the Terminator that once hunted her, is genuinely sad. Robert Patrick's T-1000 is very menacing, even if he lacks the imposing nature of Arnold. Edward Furlong is a good John Connor, and he has good chemistry with Arnold.
That being said, his character can be kind of a little asshole at times.
For example, there's a scene where the Terminator grabs him and he screams for help. When two guys come to help him, he tells them to piss off and then orders the Terminator to attack them.
I'm sorry, I know it's a small part of the movie, but it's always bugged the crap out of me. Like, why is John such a little dick in this scene? I mean, it really makes him come off like a little bastard child. I mean, okay, technically he is kind of a bastard child, but that's not the point.
But you know what? Aside from that one moment in the film, everything else is just wonderful. It's beautifully shot, beautifully acted, and beautifully realized. T2 is the definition of a perfect sequel.
Arnold Schwarzenegger. Terminator 2, Judgment Day. This time, he's back. For good.
Trust me.
At number 2 for me is the original Terminator.
James Cameron's directorial debut about a visitor from the future trying to protect a young waitress who will one day give birth to the savior of humanity remains my favorite film in the series, as well as one of my favorite films of all time.
Everything in this movie is perfection to me. The casting, the writing, the cinematography. There is nothing in this film that doesn't hold up for me. And I know most of you are wondering, why would you put this above T2? T2 is the god of movies, man. Well, honestly, there are several things that do it for me.
Yes, it was awesome seeing Arnold's Terminator back in T2 as a protector, and it works beautifully for that film. It felt like a natural progression of the storyline. But it's Terminator against Terminator. Here, there is no Terminator protector. There is no even ground. It's two humans, a soldier and a waitress, trying to survive damn near impossible odds against a killing machine. The Terminator, while some may disagree, I would argue is a straight-up horror movie. I mean, really think about it. You have an unstoppable force of evil stalking an untrained and untested young woman until she's the only one left standing and must defeat the monster on her own.
Sarah Connor is, by all respects, very much a final girl. Someone who starts off as very weak and scared at the beginning of the movie, but grows into something much more by the end. It actually kind of pisses me off when people say that, oh, we had to wait till T2 until Sarah Connor was a badass. Are we forgetting about these scenes?
On your feet, soldier! On your feet! You're terminated, fucker.
And I'm sorry, but to me, watching the character grow into a badass is more interesting than just starting the film with her already being a badass. Let's be honest, they could only do that in T2 because they earned the right to do that in this film.
The love story between Kyle and Sarah is the very heart of the movie. It naturally develops throughout the film as you see the two interact more and more.
I've heard some people make the argument that, oh, well, Kyle's a creeper because he fell in love with a photo. That entire argument is complete bullshit, and I'll tell you why.
Let's examine this for a minute. This is a guy who was born into a war and never experienced anything resembling love. He only knows war and fighting for survival. He meets his best friend, John Connor, who tells him countless stories of Sarah Connor and how she prepared him for the war. Stories of a legend, as he refers to her in his account to Sarah. That's what he fell in love with. He is in love with who Sarah is and what she will become. The photo only helped him put a face to Sarah, and in the flashbacks, we see him carrying around the photo like a security blanket, until it's unfortunately burned. Now, he has a chance to meet her, and volunteers to go back in time to save her. He is protecting Sarah, not just for the fate of the future, but so that she can one day become the woman that he loves.
So no, let's just throw the bullshit argument that he fell in love with a photo out the goddamn window right now.
The chemistry between Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton is perfect. Every reaction, every conversation, and every move they make feels natural. And, of course, this leads to the twist at the end of Kyle being John Connor's father, which, despite me guessing it about halfway through in the first viewing, was a rather intriguing twist.
The best twists are the ones that make you see the film in a whole new light upon a second viewing. And I'm sorry, the Terminator certainly falls into that category.
I don't think people have given these performances their due over the years. Everyone praises Hamilton for T2, but hardly anyone talks about her performance in this. It's a real shame. Michael Biehn, in my opinion, has always been an undervalued actor. He's great in anything, and I don't think he gets enough attention either.
Then, of course, there's the Terminator himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger. What can I say about him? He's imposing, he's scary, and while his performance is very robotic, it's perfect for the part.
Whenever you see him in this film, whether it be sitting in a hotel room repairing himself, walking into a police station, or casually strolling through a nightclub, you know shit is about to go down. He is this huge, unstoppable force, and I'd probably shit myself if I ever saw him coming my way. Going back to the horror aspects I discussed earlier, his movements, mannerisms, and unfeeling attitude reminded me of that of a slasher villain.
People can dismiss the horror elements all they want, but in my opinion, it is the very thing that most of these sequels have been missing. A Terminator should be scary. You should feel a sense of dread and unease whenever a Terminator is on screen. I got that in small doses with T2 and Salvation, but never throughout the entire film. Put it this way, I see the T-1000 and I say, oh, that looks cool. I see the T-800 in this film and I want to duck and run for cover. Trust me, there's a distinct difference.
Even the stop-motion effects for the Terminator endoskeleton look scary as hell. Seeing it come out of that fire, chasing Sarah and Kyle, yeah, the effects may look dated to some, but I personally think that they make the Terminator feel more like a robot. Its movements greatly resemble one, as they should.
Put it this way, T2 was made for $100 million. This movie was made for $6.5 million, and is far more effective in my opinion.
I love its characters, I love its passion, I love its story, and I love its heart. So yeah, I know I'm in the minority on this one, but I've always liked this movie more than T2. When it comes to Terminator films, you can add the fancy effects, you can advance the story, you can put us in the apocalypse, and you can even try horribly retooling it Star Trek 2009 style.
But in terms of acting, horror, effective storytelling, and heart, you simply can't beat the original in my opinion.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator.
So if that's how I feel about Terminator, then why the hell is it only at number 2? Well, that's because my favorite Terminator story wasn't even a movie.
The war to save mankind begins now.
Yes, at number 1 for me is the Sarah Connor Chronicles, a show that only lasted 2 seasons, reinforcing the fact that Fox will only cancel what is good on television. Only what's good. Obviously, if we're just going by the movies here, yeah, Terminator takes the top spot.
However, if I was to choose the Terminator story that gave me the most interesting, cerebral, heartfelt, badass, and overall satisfying Terminator experience, it would be the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Out of all the stories that continued directly after T2, this was the only one truly worthy of it.
I mean, I may have come around to T3, but it doesn't hold a candle to this, and as for Genisys and Dark Fate, yeah, not even close. Not even close.
The show picks up a few years after T2 with John and Sarah on the run, constantly moving around, with Sarah feeling that their nightmare isn't over, and John just wanting to live a normal existence. That is, until a new Terminator, Cromartie, is sent back to kill John, with another Terminator, Cameron, sent back to protect him. Cameron brings John and Sarah 8 years into the future, with 4 years to stop the new Judgment Day from happening in 2011. Literally everything that made the first 2 films so great is perfectly represented within this show. The world building has never been more intriguing. Remember what I was saying in my review for Dark Fate about how Skynet should have programmed the Terminators to ensure Skynet's survival after killing John?
In this show, that's exactly what Skynet's doing.
They are literally sending back Terminators posing as humans to ensure Skynet's survival and the arrival of Judgment Day. Although it is a plotline within the show, it isn't just about one Terminator killing John anymore. Skynet understands where it went wrong the first time, and is strategically putting contingency plans in effect like a game of chess. And seeing how they do it, as well as the new series of events that lead into this new Judgment Day, is rather intriguing. Every actor is perfectly casted. Lena Headey fits the role of Sarah Connor perfectly, which is more than I can say for the Mother of Dragons. Thomas Dekker is my favorite John Connor, no contest. Summer Glau as the Terminator Cameron gives the best performance I've ever seen from her in this series. There's also a character played by Brian Austin Green who adds a great deal of heart and badassery to the series. I won't spoil who he's playing, but let's just say it was a very clever move on the part of the writers to include this character. People like to point out that the effects aren't good, but I would strongly disagree.
They aren't on the level of the first 2 films, I'll give you that, but For effects done on a TV budget, they look damn impressive.
The makeup work on the Terminators is all wonderful, especially on Cameron. As the show progresses, we see more of a connection between Sarah and John than we had in T2. One thing that always bugged me about that film was that, while it was in line with her character, we never saw Sarah actually nurture her son emotionally, at least until the very end of the movie. There's a scene where John goes to hug Sarah, but instead of hugging him back, she just checks him for bruises. You'd think a mom would want to give her damn son a hug after not seeing him for several years, but fuck that. In this, Sarah can be cold when it comes to protecting John. There are scenes where she does indeed scold him for putting his life on the line, but the series uses this to its advantage by showing her grow into a better parent. There's more of an emotional connection between John and Sarah this time around that I felt was significantly absent in the past. Sarah Connor rides the fine line throughout the series of trying to balance being a good protector and a good mother at the same time, which leads to a lot of interesting conflicts for her character. John is a lot more protective this time. He's headstrong and adamant about not hiding anymore. In his mind, if he's going to be the protector and savior of mankind, he might as well earn the title. That's one of the many reasons I prefer this show to the movies. It enhances and furthers the characters and their storylines in ways I wouldn't have expected just going off the movies. And I'm not just talking about John and Sarah when I say that. There's an episode where we see Dr. Silberman and the trauma he endured after T2. Honestly, it's one of my favorite episodes, as we see him finally admitting to himself that Sarah wasn't crazy. Hell, the show even brings back Miles Dyson's wife after a couple episodes.
Ultimately, though, my favorite thing in this series is the relationship between Cameron and John, as we see John slowly fall for his protector.
It's interesting, and something we haven't seen. The chemistry between Thomas Dekker and Summer Glau is perfect. And as their time progresses, John's feelings for Cameron feel more believable. Hey, if I could buy it in Blade Runner 2049 and in Her, I could certainly buy it here.
Sadly, though, as I said, the show was canceled way too early. This was a show that deserved a much longer life, and I really can't think of anything I didn't love about this show. If I have any complaints, it's with the ending. Not because it was bad, but because it was too fucking good.
It ended on one of the best cliffhangers I have ever witnessed, and it still kills me that we have never gotten closure to that storyline.
However, I don't think that this show should be buried and overlooked just because Fox wouldn't give it a proper ending. And before anyone brings up that the show only got canceled because Halcyon went out of business, that's bullshit. The sequels to Salvation were canceled because of that. This show was canceled months before Halcyon went out of business, and the call came from Fox. TV rights and movie rights are a whole different matter. Just ask Spider-Man. But you know what? I'll always love the episodes I did get. And if you've got $20, you can pick up the series at Walmart. Trust me, it's $20 well spent. But anyway, how would you rate this franchise? Please let me know in the comments below, and please subscribe if you'd like to see more.